3 hours after the outpost went silent, Lieutenant Jalen Mercer altered the team's route. Sector Black 17 lay ahead like a scar across EIDOLON 9. The ground was fractured by old impacts and layered with dust that refused to settle. Static clung to armor plates and made every movement sound louder inside a helmet. Above Halo Ridge, the sky carried a thin, metallic haze that flattened the light and hid distance. Jalen moved at the front with his M90 coil rifle tucked tight. He was Unified Expeditionary Command Strike Lead, trained to read a battlefield in glances and half-seconds. Behind him came Corporal Mara Venn, Thermal and Power Specialist, her pack heavy with tools and spare seals. Combat Medic Rin Sato kept the rear, scanning gate and breathing more than the horizon. They had followed the outpost's last ping into Ashfall Basin and found nothing. No wreckage, no bodies, no beacon, silence that felt deliberate. Mara slowed and raised her fist. Jalen froze and dropped to one knee. The team folded into cover behind a ridge of black glass rock. "This field is wrong," Mara said, voice low. "Temperature gradient doesn't match exposure. Magnetic flux is spiking in pulses." Rin crouched beside her. "Artificial?" "Not human," Mara replied. She swept a wand across the air. "And it's close." Jalen followed her gaze. The rock face ahead looked natural until you stared long enough. The curve was too smooth. A faint seam ran through it, straight and vertical beneath dust. "Entrance," Mara said, "or a scar where one used to be." Jalen touched the surface. Cold, too cold. The material wicked heat away faster than stone should. He nodded once. "Cut it. Quiet." Mara used a low-heat microcutter, drawing a thin line along the seam. The outer layer peeled away in brittle sheets, snapping softly like thin ice. A narrow passage opened into darkness. Air flowed out, dry, clean, controlled. Jalen's visor showed oxygen stable. CO2 low. That made his stomach tighten. Safe air meant systems still running. They entered single file. The corridor curved downward, smooth and seamless. No joints, no bolts, no cabling. The floor flexed almost imperceptibly under their weight, redistributing pressure like a living membrane. Rin's sensor chimed. "Radiation is lower inside than outside." "Shielding," Mara said, "or the outside is contaminated and this place was sealed before the contamination arrived." The corridor widened into a broad chamber. The ceiling vanished into shadow. Along the far wall ran a segmented structure like a spine, plates radiating outward in fins. Mara stopped breathing for a beat. "Radiative heat spine," she said. "Waste heat radiator. It should be cold if this station is dead." She held her palm near the fins. Her glove sensor lit up. "It's warm. Active cycling." Jalen scanned the room. No footprints. No disturbed dust. "Then it isn't abandoned," he said. "Or it's abandoned and still alive." Rin replied. "Those aren't the same thing." Mara moved along the wall, searching for an interface. At first there was nothing. Then her light hit a thin translucent film embedded in the surface, like a lens laid over stone. "Here," she whispered. She pressed her thumb to it. The wall shimmered. Pale symbols appeared, geometric and repeating. Not letters, not numbers. Patterns in triads and arcs. "It's reading bioelectric signature," Mara said. "Not a keypad. Not a code. A person." A low hum filled the chamber, deep enough to feel in teeth. The symbols shifted. Then a voice emerged from the wall. It was layered sound, like two tones speaking at once. Carefully paced. Not English. Not anything their translators recognized. It spoke for several seconds, then stopped. Silence returned, heavy and clean. Mara swallowed. "Automated record," she said. "A warning, or a greeting. It woke up when it sensed us." Jalen pictured the outpost again, gone without a trace, and felt the cold logic of war press in. If this place had sensors, it had watched the basin for a long time. He keyed Team Comm. "Mark this as Eidolon Research Enclave," he said. "We log everything. We move deeper, but we move like we're being watched." Mara nodded, but her eyes stayed on the glowing film. "It wanted a user," she said softly. Rin's gaze flicked to the tunnel behind them. "And something out there will want it too." The first impact struck Halo Ridge a minute later. The vibration traveled through rock and lifted dust from the floor. A second impact followed. Closer. Then a staccato rattle that was unmistakably incoming fire walking a grid. Mara's wrist display flashed with external pings. Outer coalition forces. Sweep pattern. They found our approach line. Rin moved to the corridor and peered out through a narrow crack. At least a platoon. They'll cut the basin and net the ridge. Jalen assessed the chamber. One way in, one way out. We don't go back through that tunnel, he said. Find another path. Mara scanned the wall and found a conduit trace leading into a narrower archway. Cold air flowed from it, carrying a faint metallic scent. This way, she said. They moved single file into a smaller room dominated by a central pedestal. The pedestal ended in a ringed interface with dim inner light, like a sealed eye. Rin's radiation meter clicked faster near it. Higher here, he said, still controlled. Mara stared at the ring. This isn't power distribution, she said. It's control. This is the temporal interactor. Jalen kept his rifle low but ready. Minutes? He asked. Seconds? Short windows, Mara replied. Local timing correction. Enough to step around a strike you already saw. It needs a reference clock. Rin looked between them. A human. Mara nodded once. Neural anchor core. It syncs to a living brain to stabilize the correction. If the anchor jitters, the window collapses. Another impact shook the ridge. The sound was closer now, and the dust fell in fine streams from the ceiling seams. Jalen made the choice that kept his team alive. I anchor, he said. Rin stepped in front of him. If you do this, you follow my checks after. No pride. Understood, Jalen said. Mara's voice tightened. There's a cost, she said. The system will shed noise. It will strip high-weight synapse clusters first. The attachments. Jalen forced himself to picture Elise, her face framed by a doorway back on Earth. The way her voice softened when she tried not to show fear. He used it as a stake in the ground. Do it, he said. He placed his gloved hand on the ring. The light surged. A low hum flooded the room and pressed into bone. His visor flickered as his suit tried to interpret the field. His heartbeat lagged behind his breath, then caught up too fast. For an instant, he smelled soap and warm cloth. He heard Elise laugh, almost, and then the sound slid away. The world snapped. Silence. No impacts, no vibration. The air felt the same, but the pressure in his skull eased as if a hand had released him. Mara stared at her display. We shifted, she whispered. Stable window. Rin grabbed Jalen's shoulder. Eyes on me. Name. Lieutenant Jalen Mercer. Where are we? Inside the enclave. EIDOLON 9. Sector Black 17. Rin watched his pupils through the visor overlay. Orientation good, he said. Any nausea? Any confusion? No, Jalen replied. He expected relief. Instead, he felt an empty drawer left open in his chest. He opened his private channel and played Elise's last stored message. The words were familiar. The cadence was hers, but the sound didn't land inside him the way it should. It was like hearing a song through a cracked speaker. He stopped playback. Rin noticed immediately. What happened? Jalen swallowed. I know that was her voice, he said, but I can't remember it. Not the way it sounds when she's in the room. Mara went pale. Memory shear, she whispered. It took the attachment to steady the anchor. Jalen closed his fist until his glove creaked. He had traded a piece of himself for a few minutes of safety. Outside, the war had not stopped. They had only stepped around one blade. Rin ran a compact neurological screen in the corridor light. Motor function normal. Short-term recall intact. Orientation stable. Selective loss, Rin said. Emotion-weighted memory cluster. No gross impairment. Mara pulled data from the pedestal. Her hands moving fast despite the tremor in her fingers. Anchor load spiked during correction. She said. The system damped noise by overriding what carried the most emotional charge. Jalen listened without interrupting. He felt anger, but it was cold and focused. We report, he said. Now. Mara climbed to an upper access point where the rock thinned. She fed a compact antenna through a microvent and aligned it toward a UEC relay arc. Rin dictated the medical summary in clipped terms. Jalen added location. architecture, the active radiative system, the temporal correction capability, and the observed cost. Mara sent the burst. The reply came faster than it should have, on a secure channel with a signature that made everyone straighten. General Cassian Rourke. Lieutenant Mercer, Rourke said, calm as if discussing logistics. You have located a strategic asset. Yes, sir. You will secure Eidolon Research Enclave immediately. Rourke continued. Prevent enemy access at all costs. Temporal Security Division is en route. Rin spoke before Jalen could. Sir, activation caused acute selective memory loss. We do not understand the long-term outcomes. Rourke paused for a fraction of a second. Understood, he said. That is why you will conduct controlled activation trials until TSD arrives. Mara's jaw tightened. Sir, we are a strike unit. You are the only unit in position with surviving access. Rourke replied. You are the test unit. Jalen kept his voice steady. Sir, the cost affects attachment and judgment. Rourke's tone did not shift. Attachment can be replaced, he said. Time cannot. If we can step around enemy strikes, we reduce casualties across the entire front. The logic was clean. The cruelty was quieter. Rourke continued. Document operator tolerance. Establish a profile. You will follow protocol. Any deviation will be treated as sabotage. The channel closed. Mara lowered the antenna slowly. Rin looked at Jalen. The question unspoken. How far would command push this? Mara checked her sensors and went still. Radiative output is increasing, she said. The heat spine is dumping load. Jalen moved to the translucent hatch and looked out over Halo Ridge. A small drone crossed the sky at the edge of visibility, its silhouette sharp against the haze. IR spectral drone. It banked as if tasting the air, then continued its sweep. Jalen understood the new trap. The Enclave's waste heat would draw hunters. Command would demand experiments. The enemy would follow the same signal. He reached under his armor collar and touched the small metal tag Elise had given him before deployment. The tag was real. The initials were real. He repeated her name in his head like a code he refused to lose. Night fell fast on Eidolon 9, and the Enclave's heat began to glow on infrared like a flare that no one could ignore. 12 hours later, the enemy had found the heat. The Eidolon Research Enclave did not look like a fortress from the outside. It looked like a mistake in the rock, a seam that should not exist. But on infrared it was a beacon, and outer coalition forces had the patience to follow a beacon one ridge at a time. Lieutenant Jalen Mercer watched Halo Ridge through a narrow translucent section of the upper hatch. The night had cooled the basin, but the Enclave kept bleeding waste energy in controlled pulses. Each pulse warmed the rock skin by a fraction, just enough for a drone to notice. Corporal Mara Venn lay prone beside a vent panel, her wrist display filled with rising curves. Radiative output is cycling harder, she said. It is dumping heat to protect the core. Combat medic Rin Sato adjusted his sensor pack and checked the team again. Eyes lingering on Jalen. How is your recall? He asked quietly. Functional, Jalen replied. He did not add that Elise's voice still sounded like a recording of a stranger. He saved that for himself. A distant whine cut across the sky. The IR spectral drone returned. Closer this time. It passed once, then circled, as if triangulating. Mara's expression tightened. That is not a casual sweep. They have a fix. Jalen keyed team comms. Positions. We hold the inner corridor. No one gets to the core room. Rin gave a short nod and moved to the lower junction where the corridor narrowed. The architecture forced attackers into a funnel. That was the only advantage they had. The first enemy team hit the ridge minutes later. The Enclave walls did not shake with random impacts anymore. The enemy fire was measured, probing, stepping along angles that tested for weak seams. They were looking for a way to crack the hatch without collapsing the structure. Then a shaped charge detonated near the outer seam. Dust drifted through the upper vent. Mara swore under her breath. They're cutting it open. Jalen dropped from the hatch level to the inner corridor and took cover behind a smooth curve that offered a shallow angle. He could not see the door. He could only see the throat of the corridor where the first enemy body would appear. A shadow moved. A helmeted figure slid in. Rifle leading. Jalen fired once. The M90 coil rifle kicked. And the round struck center mass with a hard, clean impact. The enemy fell backward, blocking the entry for the next one. Jalen did not celebrate. He watched the fallen body and waited for the gap behind it. More figures pressed in. They moved with discipline, using smoke and angled mirrors to read the corridor. They were not raiders. They were soldiers who had been told this place could end a war. Rin's voice came over comms. Back pressure rising. Keep them out of the chamber. Jalen fired again and again. Controlled, letting the corridor do part of the work. Mara stayed behind them near a junction panel. Not shooting, because her job was keeping the station from cooking them alive. Her sensors chirped. She looked up sharply. The core is pulling more power. Because of the breach, Rin said. The station is compensating. Mara crawled to the side of the corridor and pressed her wand to a seam. Her display lit with radiation readouts. It is climbing, she said. Each defensive cycle increases leakage. Neutron spill is low but trending. If we activate the temporal interactor again, the anchor load will spike and the shielding will dump harder. The dose could jump into permanent injury range. Jalen felt the corridor tighten around him. Not physically, but in options. They could hold with bullets and risk being overrun. Or they could use the one thing that had saved them before. A secure tone broke into their comms. No static, no delay. General Cassian Rourke. Report, Rourke said. Jalen kept his rifle up. Enemy breach attempt. Multiple teams. We are holding the inner corridor. Rourke did not ask about casualties. Status of the asset, he said. Mara answered because Jalen did not have the numbers. Radiative heat spine is cycling. Radiation is increasing per cycle. The core is protecting itself. Then stabilize it, Rourke replied. Use controlled activation if necessary. Rin cut in, voice tight. Sir, activation increases cognitive damage and may cause permanent neural loss. Rourke's reply was smooth. Understood. The alternative is losing the enclave and giving the enemy a device that can step around our strikes. Jalen heard the logic and tasted the cruelty behind it. Rourke continued. Proceed. Casualties are lower if we move ahead of the moment. The channel closed. Mara stared at Jalen. He wants us to trade brains for minutes, she said. Jalen glanced down the corridor as another enemy figure tried to push in. He fired and the figure dropped. He could hold for a while. He could not hold forever. We do not use it yet, Jalen said. We hold as long as we can. We do not throw away memory for convenience. Rin's voice softened just a fraction. That is the first human sentence I have heard all night, he said. The next wave came heavier. The enemy deployed a compact shield plate and tried to inch it forward. Jalen aimed for the edge, not the center, and the plate twisted. The corridor filled with smoke and fragments. Mara watched her display and shook her head. Heat spine is peaking, she said. If the core overcorrects, it will vent. That will make the infrared signature worse. Jalen made a small choice that did not win the fight but kept them human. He moved back 2 meters, letting the enemy advance into a wider pocket that gave them a line of fire. He signaled Rin to pull a wounded enemy soldier from the corridor throat and drag him behind cover. Not to save him for mercy, but to keep a body from becoming a stepping stone. Rin did it without comment. Jalen fired again, holding the line while Mara fought a different battle, one against heat and radiation. And the enclave kept pulsing like a heart that did not care who listened. The enemy changed tactics at first light. They stopped pressing the corridor and started planting smart mines along the outer seams. Small devices designed to map vibrations and predict movement. They could not see inside, so they tried to make the enclave itself tell them where the defenders were. Mara tracked the mine signals through the rock. They are building a kill net, she said. If we move the wrong way, the seam will detonate and seal us in. Rin checked his radiation meter. The clicks were faster now than he remembered from earlier inside the enclave. Background dose is rising, he said. Not lethal yet, but it is not steady. Jalen studied the corridor geometry on his wrist display. A rough map assembled from Mara's scans. There was one path that led deeper to the core room and one path that led to the upper vent access. The enemy was betting they would use one of them. They want us to run, Jalen said. They want to predict the route. Mara looked at him. We can jump again, she said. Short window. 4 minutes would be enough to move before the net closes. Rin did not like it. 4 minutes will cost more than a voice clip, he said. Jalen felt the metal tag under his collar and the wedding band on his finger. The band had been a promise. The tag had been a promise. Promises mattered when everything else became numbers. A low beep sounded from Mara's sensor. Her face tightened. Mine arming sequence is active. The net is going live. Jalen made the decision he hated and accepted the part of himself that would hate him for it. We jump, he said. We jump to save the team. Not to satisfy Rourke. They moved to the core room with speed and silence. The pedestal stood in the center like a patient machine waiting for a hand. Mara kept her distance from the ring and watched the readouts. Anchor load will spike, she warned. We keep the window short. No extra correction. Rin stepped close to Jalen. When it hits, look at me, he said. Hold on to one fact, one name, one place. Do not try to hold on to everything. Jalen almost said Elise. He did not. He chose the team. I am here, he said. I am on EIDOLON 9. I am with you. He placed his hand on the ring. The hum rose immediately, deeper than the first time. It pressed into his skull and made his teeth ache. His visor clock flickered and then displayed a stable offset as if reality had decided to blink. The room stretched, not in space but in sequence. Jalen felt his heartbeat fall behind his breath again. Then surge. He smelled warm cloth and salt air for an instant. He reached for it, then forced his mind away, remembering Rin's warning. Then the hum snapped off. Silence. Jalen blinked and the core room was the same. But the air felt slightly different. Like a storm had passed without rain. The radiation clicks in Rin's meter slowed. Then resumed. Mara rushed to the corridor sensor display. We moved ahead, she said. 4 minutes. Exactly. They ran. The route that had been mined moments ago was now still in its arming phase. The enemy net had not finished closing. Jalen and his team slipped through the seam corridor and reached a safer junction point before the first detonation could lock the path. Behind them, a dull thump rolled through rock. One mine went off, sealing a passage they were no longer inside. Rin grabbed Jalen and forced eye contact. Name, he said. Jalen Mercer. Location. Eidolon Research Enclave, Sector Black 17. Rin scanned his pupils. Any gaps? He demanded. Jalen raised his left hand without thinking. The wedding band caught the light. A thin circle of metal that had survived dust and war and time correction. He stared at it. He knew what it was. He knew he had asked Elise to marry him. He knew he had meant it. But the moment itself was gone. The words he had said. The place. The way her face changed. The sound that came from her when she said yes. All of it had been erased as cleanly as a line wiped from a screen. Jalen swallowed hard. I do not remember proposing, he said. Mara looked down. Shame and fear mixed together. The anchor took a heavier piece. She said, it is stripping the high-weight memories first. Rin's voice turned colder. This is not a tool, he said. It is a grinder. It saves lives and eats the people using it. Jalen clenched his fist until the ring pressed into skin. The life they were saving felt more abstract by the minute, while the life he was losing was painfully specific. They had won the move. They had survived the net. And Jalen had lost the memory of the moment that made survival worth returning to. General Cassian Rourke arrived at Halo Ridge before the dust fully settled. His command shuttle cut through the haze with precise thrust control, landing on a flattened ridge shelf that had once been an artillery platform. UEC guards fanned out with the efficiency of people who believed the war belonged to them. Jalen watched from inside the enclave through the translucent hatch. He could not hear the shuttle from this depth, but he could feel the vibration and the shift in the enemy pattern outside. Outer coalition forces paused their assault, not retreating, not advancing, waiting to see who now owned the target. Mara muttered, "He came in person." Rin checked his radiation meter again. The baseline had risen since the last activation. Not enough to drop a healthy soldier today. Enough to change who a soldier would be a month from now. The inner corridor door opened and Rourke entered with 2 Temporal Security Division officers. He was older than Jalen had expected. Haircut short, uniform immaculate even in the dust. His eyes were calm, not kind, and not cruel in the obvious way. Cruelty was the absence of hesitation. He looked at Mara first. Then Rin. Then Jalen. "You held the asset," he said. "Good." Jalen stood at attention because training did not stop simply because a man was wrong. "Sir," he said. Rourke stepped closer, gaze drifting toward the core room behind them. "You have done more than hold," he said. "You have demonstrated capability." Mara spoke carefully. "Capability comes with escalating neurological cost. Sir, background radiation is rising. Anchor stress increases per activation." Rourke nodded as if she had recited a budget report. "Every advantage has a cost," he said. "The question is whether the cost is smaller than the war." Rin's voice was controlled. "We are not talking about bruises," he said. "We are talking about memory loss tied to identity and attachment." Rourke turned to Rin. "Medic," he said, "not as an insult, but as a classification. Attachment is a variable. Loyalty can be redirected. Trauma can be managed. But time is the only resource the enemy cannot manufacture. If we can correct a few key turns, the war ends years earlier." Jalen felt the wedding band press against his finger and said nothing. Rourke continued, eyes steady. "A handful of corrected moments can save thousands of lives. Perhaps millions. I will not apologize for that math." Mara's hands tightened. "And the operators," she said, "what happens to them?" Rourke looked at her like she had asked what happens to ammunition after it is fired. "They will be monitored," he said. "They will be compensated. They will be remembered as necessary." Jalen spoke before he could stop himself. "Sir, you are asking us to become empty," he said. Rourke did not flinch. "I am asking you to become effective," he replied. "You are already the most tolerant profile we have. That is why you will be the standard crew. The template." He turned slightly and gestured toward the core room. "Temporal Security Division will formalize the procedure. But until we establish a replacement operator pool, your team remains primary." Rin exhaled slowly. "So we are the test bed and the weapon," he said. Rourke nodded once. "Correct." Outside, a distant explosion rolled across Halo Ridge as outer coalition forces tested UEC perimeter. The war did not pause for ethics. Rourke's officers began marking stations, installing their own sensors, sealing access points. The enclave was being converted from discovery to property. Jalen looked at Mara and Rin. He saw the same realization in both of them. The enemy was no longer the only threat. The chain of command had turned the enclave into a machine that would consume whoever stood closest. As Rourke stepped back toward the hatch, he left them with a final statement delivered like doctrine. "History is not sacred," he said. "It is a set of mistakes that can be corrected." When he was gone, the enclave felt smaller. Rin checked the radiation meter again. The baseline had ticked upward. A measurable change. Dawn broke over EIDOLON9, and the background radiation around the enclave rose by another recorded level. On the second day, the neurological symptoms started showing up in clusters. It began with small things. A soldier reaching for a mag seal on a med pouch and missing it by an inch. A technician blinking too long at a familiar panel as if the labels had shifted. A pause between a question and an answer that felt like a weak connection rather than fatigue. Inside the Eidolon Research Enclave, the air stayed dry and controlled. But the people inside it were not. Corporal Mara Venn sat on the floor of a narrow service bay. Her back to a smooth wall that gave no comfort. She had a decoded data stream projected onto her wrist display and a second display balanced on her knee. Both filled with patterns that refused to behave like human language. Combat medic Rin Sato stood over her. Scanner wand in hand, eyes moving between Mara's data and the small tremors in her fingers. Lieutenant Jalen Mercer waited at the corridor junction with his rifle lowered but ready. Listening to the distant thud of artillery and the quieter, more personal clicks of Rin's radiation meter. Mara finally exhaled as if she had been holding her breath for hours. "I got the record to map to a structure," she said. "Not a translation, a sequence." Rin leaned in. "What sequence?" Mara tapped the screen and expanded a section. A cascade of geometric clusters unfolded, each cluster tied to a time stamp that did not match any UEC standard. "It's a history," Mara said. "A lab log. This station belonged to a civilization that used temporal correction the way we use navigation. And they collapsed." Jalen stepped closer. "Collapsed how?" Mara's eyes stayed on the data. But her voice carried a strain that made the words heavier. "They did not lose a battle," she said. "They lost continuity. They corrected so many moments that their society stopped agreeing on what had happened. Decision chains broke. Trust broke. Governance became impossible." Rin's expression tightened. "Civil war. Or something worse," Mara replied. "Not factions. Fractures. People living in the same place with different histories in their heads." Jalen felt cold spread under his armor collar. He had already felt a small version of it. A missing voice. A missing moment. If the scale grew, it did not end at memory. It ended at identity. Mara scrolled again and highlighted a repeating pattern. "They built memory shear into the system," she said. "It's not a malfunction. It's an intentional limit." Rin's scanner wand paused midair. "A limit?" Mara nodded. "A break. A safety constraint. It strips the highest emotional load first. It forces the operator to pay with attachment." Jalen's jaw set. "To stop people from using it too often." "Exactly," Mara said. "If you correct time, you win a fight, but the price is you lose something you cannot replace. It is designed so no one can keep doing it forever." Rin stared at the data and spoke like he was reading a verdict. "Because nobody can tolerate becoming empty and still choose to continue." Mara's fingers trembled harder. She did not hide it. "There's more," she said. She opened a new packet. One that was not alien. It was a UEC medical overlay. Recent and encrypted. Stamped with Temporal Security Division credentials. Jalen's eyes narrowed. "That wasn't here yesterday." Mara looked up. "TSD installed it when General Rourke arrived," she said. "They've been pushing protocols and pharmacology down our local net." Rin held out his hand. Mara passed him the display. Rin read, and his face hardened in a way Jalen had only seen when a medic realized a wound was not an accident. "They're trying to suppress memory shear," Rin said. Mara's voice dropped. "They're calling it operator stabilization. It's a cocktail. Neuromodulators, stimulants, something that forces consolidation after each activation." Jalen felt anger rise, sharp and immediate. "They want to break the break." Rin nodded once. "Slow. They want a crew that can keep activating without losing function. And if the memory damage shifts to a different pattern, they'll call it success." Mara swallowed. "The alien record warns against this," she said. "There's a section where the station's designers describe what happens when you interfere with the safety constraint." Rin looked at her. "What happens?" Mara did not answer quickly. She scrolled, found the sequence, and read the closest thing she had to a summary. "It says if you remove the break," she said, "you don't eliminate the cost. You move it. You redistribute the damage. The mind will still shed noise. It will just shed it in unpredictable ways. Mood regulation, impulse control, moral judgment." Jalen heard the words and thought of Rourke's calm voice. The clean logic. The certainty that history was a set of mistakes to be corrected. He realized the trap was not only technological. It was ethical. Once a weapon could alter outcomes, the person holding it could justify almost anything. Outside the enclave, distant fire rolled over Halo Ridge. The enemy had not stopped hunting. But inside, something worse had taken position. Rin handed the display back. "We need to keep this from becoming a machine that eats operators on schedule," he said. Mara nodded, then forced a steadier breath. "There's a failsafe," she said. "The alien station can lock itself. It can close its own access to temporal correction. It was designed as a last resort." Jalen's eyes sharpened. "Can we trigger it?" Mara hesitated. "Yes," she said, "but it will make the enclave useless to UEC. And General Rourke won't accept that." Rin looked toward the corridor that led to the core room. "Then that's the real conflict," he said. "Not OCF versus UEC. It's a war over what kind of victory counts." Jalen felt the wedding band on his finger like a thin weight that suddenly mattered more than any rifle. He had survived 2 corrections. He could survive a third. He wasn't sure he could survive what Rourke wanted them to become. Jalen tried the back channel to Earth anyway. It took time to get a clean line. It took a patient alignment of the antenna and a narrow beam toward a relay that might still exist. The signal delay was long enough to make conversation feel like sending messages into weather. He sat alone in a side corridor where the enclave's smooth wall curved overhead. The radiative system thrummed faintly through stone. Somewhere deeper, TSD technicians moved with quiet confidence, installing their sensors, logging every heartbeat and pupil shift. Jalen opened the secure civilian channel he had kept for months. It was supposed to be private. It no longer felt private. When Elise's identifier appeared on his visor, he felt a strange calm. Not warmth, not relief. Calm, like looking at a photograph from a life that belonged to someone else. He sent a short packet first. A coded check-in, a request. The reply arrived with delay. Then Elise's voice filled his helmet. "Jalen," she said, "I got your ping. Are you safe?" The words were her words. The cadence was hers. The tiny hesitation after his name was the same as always. The way she softened a moment before pretending to be strong. But the sound did not reach his chest. Jalen listened as if he were analyzing audio rather than hearing someone he loved. "Elise," he said. His own voice sounded steady. Professional. He hated that. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "Your last message sounded wrong. Like you were far away." Jalen closed his eyes and tried to remember the first time he heard her speak. He could remember the place and facts. He could remember what she wore. He could remember the light. But the sound was missing. Like a channel cut out of the world. "I'm not hurt," he said. A pause. Then, softer. "Do you still have the ring?" Jalen stared at his left hand. The band was scratched, dust-stained, still perfectly circular. "Yes," he answered. "Say something only you would say." Elise replied, "I need to know it's you." Jalen searched for it. Something personal. Something that used to rise without effort. He found a phrase in his mind like a printed label. He said it. It landed flat. He heard her small exhale on the other end and knew she was trying to smile. "Okay," Elise said. "Okay, I'm here. I'm still here." Jalen's throat tightened, not with love, but with fear. "Elise," he said, carefully, "tell me about the last time I left." Silence. Then her voice again. "You stood in the doorway," she said. "You said you'd come back. You said you'd come back even if the front moved again. You promised. And you meant it." Jalen tried to see it. He tried to feel it. His mind offered a clean blank space where the scene should have been. "I don't remember saying that," he admitted. Elise's breathing changed. "What do you mean you don't remember?" Jalen swallowed. He could have lied. He could have protected her from the truth. But the war had already stolen too much truth. He needed one act that kept him human. Even if it hurt. "There's a device here," he said. "It does something to time. It does something to memory. I can hear you, but I can't feel the sound the way I used to." Elise was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a steadiness that did not belong to someone who had no armor. "Then write it down," she said. "Write down what matters. Write down what you promised. If they steal it from your head, don't let them steal it from the world." Jalen blinked. The advice was simple, human, stubborn. He looked at the smooth wall beside him and realized the enclave had no paper. No scratches. No place for a mark. It was built to erase disturbance. "Elise," he said, "I'm scared." "Of dying?" she asked. Jalen stared at the ring again. "No," he said, "I'm scared of living and not knowing who I loved." Elise's voice softened. "Then come back before they take it all," she said. Jalen almost said he would. The words rose and stopped. A promise felt dangerous now. Not because the war might kill him, but because his mind might not hold the promise long enough to keep it true. "I'll try," he said instead, and hated the weakness of it. The delay stretched. Elise spoke again, quieter. "Jalen, look at the ring," she said. "That ring is a fact. Even if they steal the story, they can't change that you chose me." Jalen held the ring between finger and thumb and tried to let the fact become feeling. For a heartbeat, he felt something small and warm, like the edge of a memory trying to return. Then it slipped away. The call ended with a relay drop. Jalen sat in silence and realized he was mourning something that had not fully died yet. That was the cruelest part. The takeover began in the hours before the next enemy assault. TSD officers moved deeper into the enclave, laying down command lines, installing additional radiation monitors, and locking junction doors with codes Jalen's team did not have. They were polite about it. They called it procedure. They called it protection. It felt like occupation. Rin met Jalen at the corridor throat with his scanner pack and a look that said the moment had arrived. "They're staging," Rin said. "UEC troops are moving to seize the core room. General Rourke wants direct access." Jalen looked past him and saw UEC boots in the distance. Rifles angled down, ready to angle up. Behind them, the air shimmered faintly with heat discharge from the radiative system. Mara appeared from a service bay, face pale, visor smudged with dust. "OCF is massing outside the ridge," she said. "They've stopped probing. That means they're about to hit hard." Jalen exhaled slowly. "They're timing the strike with our internal shift," he said. Rin nodded. "2 lines of fire," he said. "Enemy outside, command inside." A secure chime sounded in their helmets. Rourke's voice. "Close now. Not mediated by distance." "Lieutenant Mercer," he said. "Open access to the core room." Jalen did not move. "Sir, we need to lock the enclave down," he said. "The radiation is rising. Each activation increases leakage. We can't keep cycling." Rourke's reply was calm. "Your role is not strategic," he said. "It is operational. You will comply." Mara's hands clenched. "Sir, the alien record indicates a failsafe," she said. "A permanent lock that prevents further temporal correction. It exists for a reason." Rourke's tone stayed even. "Then we will not trigger it," he said. "We will manage the cost with stabilization protocols." Rin's voice sharpened. "Those protocols override a designed safety constraint," he said. "They risk unpredictable impairment. They risk moral collapse." A brief pause. Then Rourke. "We are at war," he said. "Moral collapse is losing the front." The channel closed. Outside, the first heavy impacts hit Halo Ridge. Not probes. Not tests. Real artillery. The enclave shook as dust fell from seams. The radiative system reacted immediately, dumping heat in a harder pulse that made the air feel warmer. Mara glanced at her sensors and went rigid. "Core temperature spike," she said. "If they breach while the core is venting, we could get a runaway." Jalen saw the shape of the trap. If OCF pushed in now, UEC would demand an activation to stay ahead. And if they activated, the core would spike again. Radiation would rise, and the anchor would strip more memory. Rourke was counting on that. Not because he enjoyed the cost, but because he believed the cost was acceptable. Jalen made a decision that felt like stepping off a ledge. "We lock it," he said. Mara stared at him. "If we trigger failsafe lock, UEC will treat it as sabotage." "I know," Jalen said, "but this device is not a weapon we can afford to normalize." Rin's voice was quiet. "If we do nothing, they will normalize it for us," he said. UEC troops advanced into the corridor. "Rifles up now. Stand aside," a TSD officer ordered. "By authority of Unified Expeditionary Command." Jalen did not raise his rifle. He raised his empty hand. "Palm out. This enclave is unstable," he said. "We need time." "No," the officer replied. "We need control." Behind them, another impact rocked the ridge. A section of outer seam cracked. Dust poured in. The sound of OCF cutting tools rose. Harsh and close. Mara moved toward the core room, hands already working on a panel she had identified earlier. Rin followed her, scanning radiation and watching Jalen for any sign the memory loss was turning into hesitation. Jalen held the corridor line without firing, keeping UEC troops from pushing past him while the enemy outside tried to force a way in. It was a dangerous posture. A refusal to choose a side that still required courage. Then the core room alarm tone changed. Mara's voice snapped over comms. "Heat spike is beyond safe margin," she said. "If the core runs away, it will vent into the lattice. It could crack the radiative spine." Rin's answer was immediate. "Can you damp it?" "Not with the controls I have," Mara said. "It needs a micro correction. A short activation to rebalance." Seconds, not minutes. Jalen understood the price before she finished the sentence. He ran into the core room. The pedestal waited, indifferent. The ring glowed faintly, as if eager. Mara looked at him, fear in her eyes. "If you do this," she said, "it will take something heavier again." Jalen's fingers touched the wedding band. His mind reached for Elise. Not for her voice, not for the proposal, but for her face. He could still see it. He could still place the shape of her eyes. The slight asymmetry of her smile. It was thin, fragile, but it existed. Outside, OCF charges detonated. And the corridor trembled. UEC troops shouted commands. And their boots pounded closer. Jalen placed his hand on the ring. He kept his breath slow. He kept one thought. Mara lives. Rin lives. The enclave stays locked. The hum rose, sharp and intense, like a wire vibrating under strain. The world tightened. Then it snapped back. Mara's display stabilized, core temperature dropping. She gasped. It worked. It balanced the load. Rin grabbed Jalen's shoulder. "Look at me," he said. "Name." "Jalen Mercer." "Where are we?" "Eidolon Research Enclave." Rin scanned pupils. "Any loss?" he demanded. Jalen turned his head toward Mara to answer. And his gaze caught on the smooth wall behind her. For a split second, he saw a reflection in the translucent panel near the pedestal. A face that should have meant everything. It meant nothing. He knew, logically, that it had been Elise's face. He knew the concept. He knew she existed, but the image in his mind was gone, replaced by an unfilled space. Jalen's mouth went dry. Mara saw it happen. "Jalen," she said softly. He swallowed and forced words out. "I can't see her," he said. "I can't picture her face." Rin's expression shifted from professional control to something closer to grief. "That's deeper," he said. "That's core identity territory." Outside, the enclave shook again. The radiative heat spine responded with a violent cycle, dumping energy so hard the air vibrated. It sounded like a scream traveling through metal. UEC troops surged toward the core room, shouting orders, while OCF forces broke through the outer seam at the same time. Jalen stood between two assaults, one wearing his uniform and one wearing the enemy's. In the chaos of those seconds, the enclave's radiative system howled like metal about to tear. 2 days later, the radiative system could survive only one more cycle. The Eidolon Research Enclave had stopped feeling like a discovery. It felt like a failing engine wrapped in stone. Every pulse of the heat spine came with a harsher vibration. Every dump of waste energy pushed the surrounding rock closer to fracture. The air inside stayed dry, filtered, and controlled, but the click rate on Rin Sato's radiation meter had become a constant soundtrack. Lieutenant Jalen Mercer stood at the corridor throat with his rifle slung and his hands empty. He had learned that the most dangerous moments were not the ones where you pulled a trigger. They were the ones where you chose what kind of person you would be when no one could afford that choice. He could still speak Elise's name. He could still identify a ring on his finger. He could not see her face in his mind. It was a blank shape where warmth should have been. Corporal Mara Venn called him into the service bay. She had stripped a panel down to its underlayer, revealing a lattice of alien conduits that carried energy and timing signals the way nerves carried pain. Her eyes were red from sleeplessness, but her hands were steady. "I have a way to end this," she said. Rin stepped in behind Jalen. Scanner pack hugged tight to his chest. He looked like someone who had been asked to keep counting injuries while a war turned injuries into policy. Mara tapped her wrist display and projected a simplified model of the temporal interactor's architecture. "It doesn't work like a time machine," she said. "It works like a local phase correction loop. It finds a stable window, then forces the anchor brain to match that window. The anchor becomes the reference clock." Jalen's jaw tightened, and the memory shear is the brake. "Yes," Mara replied, "a safety constraint. When the anchor begins to overload, the system sheds the heaviest associations to reduce jitter. That keeps the correction stable." Rin's voice was flat. "It keeps the operator useful by making them less human." Mara nodded once. "UEC thinks it can medicate around it," she said, "but the alien record was clear. If you fight the break, you don't remove the cost. You just move it into unpredictable impairment." Jalen stared at the projection. The curves were clean. The reality was not. Mara expanded another layer. "There's a component I didn't fully understand before," she said. "The synchrony anchor. It's a coupling module. It ties the interactor's timing lattice to the operator's hippocampal consolidation cycle." Rin leaned in. "Meaning?" "It means if we burn that coupling module," Mara said, "the interactor loses its ability to bind to a living clock. It becomes inert. It can still exist as hardware, but it cannot open a correction window." Jalen looked at her. "You want to destroy the anchor?" Mara's voice stayed steady, but her eyes flicked toward the corridor where TSD patrols moved in disciplined intervals. "I want to lock the window," she said, "permanently." Rin exhaled slowly. "That's not sabotage," he said, "that's containment." Mara nodded. The enclave was designed to self-lock under abuse. The designers expected someone like Rourke. They built the failsafe, but it requires access and time. Jalen asked the question that mattered. "What's the cost?" Mara did not hesitate. "We lose our last escape," she said. "No more short window corrections. If OCF breaches and UEC turns on us, we can't step around the moment. We will have to survive like normal soldiers." "Which is almost tactical suicide," Rin added. Mara's hands tightened around her display. "It's still the only moral survival," she said, "because right now the only way we win is by turning people into empty operators." Jalen looked down at his wedding band. The metal was real. The story behind it was gone. He felt anger at the device. At Rourke. At himself for touching the ring and expecting it to make him whole again. Then he made a choice that felt like the last piece of him that could still choose. "Do it," he said. Mara blinked. "Jalen." He cut her off, voice low. "If the price of victory is forgetting the person I promised my life to," he said, "that isn't victory. That's a clean defeat with a medal on it." Rin watched him for a long beat. Then nodded once, almost respectfully. "That's discipline," he said, "not weakness." Mara's shoulders sagged, relief and dread at once. "We have to do it before the next radiative cycle," she said. "One more hard dump and the lattice may crack. If it cracks while the interactor is live, it could vent into the corridor grid." Jalen's eyes sharpened. "We move tonight," he said. "Quiet. No extra activations." Outside, distant artillery rolled over Halo Ridge. Inside, the enclave hummed like a machine waiting for someone to decide what it was allowed to become. Rin built the case while Mara built the lock. He was not a politician. He was a combat medic. But the war had taught him that data could be a weapon if it could survive the chain of denial. He had scanned Jalen after every activation. He had logged pupil response, reaction time, gait symmetry, micro tremors, and emotional flattening markers. He had charted how memory loss progressed from auditory association to episodic gaps to facial recall collapse. He had also scanned the TSD troops who had arrived after Rourke. Smaller symptoms, early signs. They were starting to run trials on other operators in short bursts, trying to establish a tolerance profile. Rin knew what those charts would become: justification. He turned justification into accusation. He compiled a packet he called, privately, the guilt file. It was not filled with adjectives. It was filled with timestamps, radiation doses, pharmacology protocols, and cognitive drift graphs. He attached Mara's decoded alien warning sequence. He added Rourke's recorded orders pulled from secure comm logs, stripped of any commentary, because the words were enough. Jalen watched him work from the corridor, rifle ready, mind strangely calm. "You think anyone will read it?" Jalen asked. Rin didn't look up. "If they don't read it," he said, "it still exists, and if it exists, it can't be erased by one man's authority." Mara met them at the upper relay vent. Face smudged with dust, hands stained with sealant. "I can push a packet," she said, "but the relay path is unstable." Jalen looked at the sky through a translucent hatch. The haze over Halo Ridge was thicker now, tinted with particulate from bombardment. "Delay," he said. "Hours," Mara replied. "Maybe longer. The chain might be broken." Rin tightened the packet, compressed it, added redundant encryption. "Send it anyway," he said. "Let the delay be the enemy's problem." Mara fed the antenna through the microvent and aligned it. The relay tone chirped once, then steadied. She sent the packet. Somewhere beyond Eidolon 9's orbit, a thin beam carried their evidence toward a system that might already be too invested to care. Jalen felt the silence after the send. It was the silence of a choice made without guarantee. Rin lowered his hand from the display and finally looked at Jalen. "If Command receives this," he said, "they might stop Rourke. And if they don't," Jalen replied, "he'll stop us." Rin gave a small nod. "That's why we locked the window tonight." They moved back toward the core corridor. TSD patrols were tighter now, their routes more frequent. Rourke's takeover had become a net. Mara whispered as they passed a junction. "He knows something is happening." Jalen didn't ask how she knew. He could feel it in the air. In the way lights pulsed. In the way the Enclave seemed more awake when TSD boots moved near the core room. The secure comm tone broke into their helmets. "Rourke again. Close. Controlled. Lieutenant Mercer," he said, "stand down and report to the upper hatch." Jalen kept walking. "For what purpose, sir?" "To preserve national property," Rourke replied. "Your team is now classified as an essential asset. You will be detained for medical stabilization and continued operation under supervision." Rin's eyes narrowed. "Detained," he repeated. Rourke's voice did not soften. "Captured alive," he said. "If you resist, you will be treated as hostile. Do not make me waste you." The channel closed. Mara's breathing quickened. "He's moving," she said. "He wants us intact." Rin's voice was hard, because an empty operator is still useful. Jalen felt a cold clarity settle. Rourke wasn't angry. Rourke was efficient. That made him more dangerous than any enemy soldier. They had one cycle left. One night. One chance to end the window before the window ended them. Rourke chose the final leverage with the same calm logic he used for artillery. He didn't threaten Jalen with death. Death was simple. He threatened him with proof that the backline was not safe. That nothing personal belonged to the soldier anymore. Jalen was in the service bay with Mara, hands on the panel that concealed the synchrony anchor lattice. They were minutes from initiating the burn sequence. Mara had designed it to be irreversible. A controlled overload that would melt the coupling node without cracking the rest of the core. Rin stood watch at the corridor mouth, scanner pack in one hand and his sidearm in the other, because he no longer trusted a clean chain of command. Then Jalen's private channel opened by itself. Not a request, not a call, an intrusion. Elise's identifier flashed on his visor. His stomach tightened even before the audio began, because he hadn't been able to picture her face for days. Her name was a concept in his mind, a fact, not a living image. The recording played. Elise's voice filled his helmet. "Jalen," she said, softly, with the same small hesitation after his name. "If you're hearing this, it means the relay found you. Please answer. Please come back." Jalen's fingers trembled against the panel. He did not feel love rise. He did not feel warmth. He felt a sharp, hollow awareness of what he had lost. Rourke's voice cut in over the recording, layered on top of it like a blade laid on a photograph. "You recognize the sound," Rourke said, "but you don't feel it anymore. That's the cost you've already paid." Jalen forced his voice to stay steady. "You accessed my civilian channel." "Correct," Rourke replied. "The backline is porous. Everything is a system. Systems can be entered." Mara's eyes went wide. Rin stepped closer from the corridor, rage tightening his posture. Rourke continued, calm as if reading a report. "You've forgotten her face. Soon you'll forget why her name mattered. That makes you cleaner, more reliable." Jalen's hand shook harder, not from fear, but from a kind of moral nausea. He stared at the smooth alien lattice and thought of how easily a person could become a tool if someone decided the person's inner life was expendable. Rourke's voice dropped slightly, still controlled. "Tell me, Lieutenant," he said, "if she's already gone in your mind, what's left to hesitate over?" The question landed like a weight on Jalen's chest. He realized the trap wasn't only psychological. It was strategic. If Rourke could make him believe he was already empty, Jalen would stop resisting the conversion. He would become the perfect operator, alive, obedient, hollow. Mara whispered, "Jalen, look at me." Jalen turned his head. He could see Mara's face. He could see Rin's face. He could see the fear in both. And the stubborn insistence that he was still here. He did something small and human. Not because it would win the war. But because it was the last discipline he could still command. He closed the private channel. The recording cut off. Rourke's voice did not return. The silence was the point. Jalen exhaled. Slow. He wants me to accept being empty, he said. Rin's jaw tightened. Then don't, he said. Choose constraint. Mara's hand steadied. We burn the anchor, she said. Now. Jalen stared at the lattice and felt his trembling settle into control. He could not remember Elise's face. But he could remember that there was a line he would not cross. Even if crossing it kept him alive longer. That's what's left, Jalen said quietly. The line. Mara initiated the burn sequence. A low warning tone pulsed through the panel. Heat rose in a controlled wave. The enclave responded with a deeper hum, as if recognizing the act as both injury and salvation. Outside, the sky lightened toward dawn. The haze over Halo Ridge thinned just enough to reveal the first hard line of sunlight. And with the sunlight came the radiation stain. Even through armor and filters, the rising background dose made skin feel raw, as if the world itself had become an irritant. Rin's meter clicked faster. Mara's display flashed a threshold warning. Jalen held his breath, listening to the enclave's hum deepen, waiting to see if the coupling node would fail cleanly or take them all with it. He felt no warmth from Elise's voice. He felt no image of her face. But he felt something else, sharp and solid. The discipline to refuse a cruel kind of victory. 1 hour before the core overheated, every choice had only one attempt. The Eidolon Research Enclave was no longer quiet. It was loud in ways a machine could be loud. Fans screamed somewhere behind the stone skin. Valves pulsed. The radiative spine dumped heat in ragged cycles that made the air vibrate. Rin Sato's meter clicked so fast it sounded like rain on metal. Lieutenant Jalen Mercer moved through the corridor grid with his rifle up and his mind narrowed to essentials. He had learned the wrong lesson first. He had learned how to survive. Now he was trying to learn how to stay himself while surviving. Corporal Mara Venn was ahead of him, crouched at a service panel with both hands inside the alien lattice. The burn sequence had started the night before. It had not finished. The synchrony anchor was resisting in a way only engineered systems could resist. It was not alive, but it defended its own continuity. Outside the enclave, outer coalition forces had finally committed. Their breach teams had forced the outer seam open. Inside the enclave, UEC troops under General Cassian Rourke were pushing deeper, trying to seize the core room intact. Jalen's team was trapped between them. A hard burst of gunfire echoed down the curved corridor. A UEC squad advanced from the upper junction. Rifles high, discipline cold. Behind them, smoke rose from the outer passage where OCF had cut through. Jalen could hear their boots too. Closer now, 2 sets of enemies, each convinced they were the rightful owner of the same weapon. Rin slid to cover beside Jalen and whispered, "We do not have enough oxygen margin for a long fight." Jalen nodded. "We hold just long enough." Mara's voice came over comms. Tight and focused. "I need 9 minutes to finish the burn." "Make it 7, Rin replied. Mara did not argue. "I will try." A UEC officer stepped into view at the corridor bend. Visor bright. Weapon steady. "Lieutenant Mercer," he called. "Stand down, by order of General Rourke." Jalen did not fire. He also did not move aside. "This enclave is failing," Jalen said. "If you force access now, you will cook the lattice." The officer's voice stayed flat. "We were told you would say that." The squad shifted, preparing to rush. From the other side, an OCF breach team appeared through smoke. Helmets darker, weapons angled low then rising. They saw the UEC squad and stopped for half a second. That half second was Jalen's only opening. He fired a short burst at the ceiling seam between them. Not to kill, to collapse a thin layer of brittle paneling and dust. The corridor filled with grit and smoke, breaking line of sight and forcing both squads to hesitate. Rin grabbed a compact strobe emitter and threw it into the corridor throat. It flashed in a tight pattern designed to confuse cheap optics and slow a rush without blinding his own team. Jalen moved. He dragged a portable heat shield panel from a storage recess and slammed it into place across the narrow corridor. It did not seal them. It only bought seconds. Mara's voice cut in again. Core temp rising. The lattice is fighting the burn. If it spikes, the radiative spine will dump hard. Keep your hands steady, Jalen said. I'm steady, Mara replied. The station is not. Rin checked Jalen's face through visor overlay. You are shaking, he said. Jalen looked down and realized his left hand trembled on the rifle grip. It was not fear. It was fatigue in his nervous system. A fine instability that came from being used as a reference clock and then thrown away. He forced the tremor into control. Behind the heat panel, boots pounded, UEC on one side, OCF on the other. They were both trying to break through. Each impact reverberated through the enclave like a warning bell. Then the temperature jumped. The floor under Jalen's boots warmed fast. Heat rising through alloy and stone. The radiative spine was dumping energy again. Not smoothly, but in a panicked surge. Mara coughed over comms. I am seeing redline on the core channel. Rin's meter changed pitch as well as tempo. Radiation spike, he said. Jalen understood what was happening. If Mara could not finish the burn, the system would enter a runaway. And if it entered runaway while soldiers fought inside the corridors, the enclave would become a tomb for all of them. Jalen made a hand signal to Rin. Stay with Mara, he said. I will draw Rourke. Rin grabbed his arm. If you go toward him, he will try to take you alive. I know, Jalen said. That is why I must go. He moved toward the radiative corridor where the heat spine ran closest to the access grid. That corridor was the worst place to stand. It was also the place Rourke would choose to control, because it connected to the core room. Jalen reached the corridor and felt the heat immediately. The metal underfoot had gone from warm to painful. He adjusted his suit's thermal limiters, but they screamed warnings anyway. The air shimmered with rising heat like a mirage trapped indoors. A figure stepped into view through the wavering air. General Cassian Rourke. He moved without hurry. His uniform was sealed, his visor clear, his weapon not raised. He looked like someone who believed he could walk through fire because the math said he should. You keep choosing the wrong objective, Rourke said. Jalen aimed his rifle but did not fire. I choose containment, he replied, because you are turning soldiers into expendable clocks. Rourke's eyes stayed calm. You are already damaged, he said. Your sentiment is only making the damage less useful. Jalen felt the tremor in his hand again. He tightened his grip until it steadied. You stole a recording from my civilian channel, he said. Rourke did not deny it. You call it theft, he said. I call it leverage. War is leverage. The floor glowed faintly at a seam line. The first hint of metal approaching red. The radiative spine was dumping too hard now. The enclave was screaming without a voice. Jalen took one step closer. Not because he wanted a fight, but because he wanted Rourke to stand in the heat and feel the cost. Even through armor. Rourke watched him like a technician watching a failing component. You cannot stop this, he said. Even if you destroy the coupling, we will rebuild. We will find another anchor. Jalen spoke carefully. Not if the station locks itself, he said. Not if the window closes permanently. A small change crossed Rourke's expression. Not fear, calculation. You are attempting to trigger the failsafe, Rourke said. I am finishing what the designers intended, Jalen replied. A limit. Rourke stepped closer. The heat shimmer thickened between them. Limits are for people who cannot bear responsibility, he said. Jalen heard the words and realized this was the center of everything. Rourke believed restraint was weakness. Jalen believed restraint was discipline. Behind Jalen, alarms rose in rapid bursts. The enclave was approaching the end of its tolerance. Rourke's voice carried no anger. That was what made it dangerous. If you forget the person you love, Rourke said, you hurt less, you function better, you can do the larger work. Jalen felt the ring on his finger. A thin band of metal that meant more than he could remember. He could not picture Elise. He could not replay the proposal. He had lost too much. But he still understood what Rourke was asking him to become. I am not here to feel less. Jalen said. "I am here to choose correctly." Rourke's gaze flicked toward Jalen's left hand. "You are clinging to symbols," he said. "The symbol remains even when the story is gone. That should free you." "It should terrify me," Jalen replied. The radiative corridor grew hotter. Jalen's suit warned him again, insisting on retreat. Rourke did not retreat. He stood as if heat were only a number. "You think this is morality," Rourke said. "It is sentiment dressed as virtue. Ending the war sooner saves more lives." Jalen kept his rifle trained. "At what cost?" he asked. "How many minds do you hollow out to save bodies?" Rourke answered without hesitation. "As many as required," he said. "A controlled sacrifice is still a sacrifice. You prefer uncontrolled slaughter." Jalen thought of Mara's hands inside the lattice, trying to burn the coupling node before the core ran away. He thought of Rin counting the damage in charts that no one might read. He thought of Elisa's voice in that recording, asking him to come back. He could not see her face. He could not feel the sound. But he could still recognize the goodness in the present. He could still protect it. "That is where you are wrong," Jalen said. "You think hope is correcting mistakes behind us." Rourke's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you think it is what?" he asked. Jalen answered with the only truth he still had. "Hope is protecting what is still good right now," he said, "even if it costs me the easy win." A sharp tone broke through comms. Mara's voice, strained. "The coupling is failing," she said. "I need the corridor clear. The next surge may vent." Rourke heard it too. His gaze shifted toward the core access route. He moved. Jalen moved faster. He did not shoot Rourke. He shot the control node on the corridor wall that fed lock authority into the core room. The coil round smashed it into fragments. The corridor lights flickered. A door seal tone sounded deeper in the enclave. Rourke stopped, then turned his head slowly. "You just locked me out," he said. "I locked the system out of you," Jalen replied. Rourke stepped toward him, weapon still not raised. "You cannot hold this position," Rourke said. "My troops will take you alive." Jalen felt sweat under his collar. Heat shimmered. The floor seam glowed brighter. "You may take me," Jalen said, "but you will not take the window." Rourke's voice remained calm to the end. "You are trading strategic victory for personal comfort," he said. Jalen shook his head once. "I am trading strategic arrogance for discipline," he replied. A deeper alarm sounded, not a warning, a threshold. The enclave itself was making a decision now. Mara's voice came again, almost a whisper. "It is done," she said. "The anchor is burned." Rourke's posture stiffened for the first time. "No," he said, not as a plea, but as a calculation failing. The floor trembled. The radiative spine screamed again. But the pitch changed, turning from panic to release. The system was shedding load in a final controlled dump, as if choosing to survive by becoming something smaller. Rourke stared at the corridor panel, then back at Jalen. "You will regret this," he said. Jalen did not argue. He did not have enough memory left to waste on pride. He stepped back as heat rose and the corridor became impossible to hold. Rourke was still standing there, locked outside the control path, still convinced he was right even as the weapon slipped from his hands. The temporal interactor closed its window without anyone's permission. The core room lights dimmed, then steadied at a low level. The hum that had once pressed into bone vanished. In its place came a simple, mechanical quiet, like a machine that had been shut down properly after years of abuse. Mara stumbled out of the service bay, face pale, hands shaking from exertion and radiation. Rin caught her by the shoulder and guided her into the cooler corridor pocket where the air still felt breathable. Jalen found them moments later, his boots leaving faint heat prints that faded quickly on the floor. He looked at Mara's face first, making sure she was still here. He looked at Rin's hands, making sure they were steady. "It is locked," Mara said. "It cannot anchor to a living clock anymore. It is a tomb now." Rin's meter still clicked fast, but it slowed as the radiative cycle stabilized. "Background dose is still high," he said, "but the spikes are ending." OCF gunfire echoed deeper in the outer corridor. UEC shouts echoed from the upper junction. Both sides were still fighting, but the reason they had come was gone. Jalen leaned against the smooth wall and tried to breathe through the ache in his chest. He reached for Elise in his mind and found only fragments. One sentence, without context, "Come back." One smell, faint, like soap on warm cloth. One promise, blurred at the edges, a sense that he had once vowed something with full certainty. He touched the wedding band and felt metal. He could not feel the story. Rin crouched in front of him. "Stay with me," Rin said. "Name?" "Jalen Mercer," Jalen replied. "Good," Rin said. "We get you out, then we rebuild what can be rebuilt." Jalen wanted to laugh, rebuild memory like a wall. But Rin's voice was steady. And steadiness mattered. Mara pulled a small module from her pack. A compact transmitter with a hardened casing. "I saved one path," she said. A low power burst through the relay vent. "It might get out." Rin looked at her. "What are you sending?" Mara glanced at Jalen, then back to the module. "A warning," she said, "about this technology and its cost. About what Command tried to do." Jalen nodded once. "Send it," he said, "even if no one reads it in time." Mara aligned the module to the vent. She compressed the packet again, added redundant metadata, and pushed it through the narrow beam. Somewhere far beyond EIDOLON9. A relay might catch it. A tribunal might ignore it. A power center might exploit it. But the message would exist. Outside, the fighting began to shift. OCF teams realized the core was inert. UEC squads realized their command authority no longer opened anything that mattered. The battle turned back into a normal battle. Ugly and finite. That was the victory Jalen chose. A victory with limits. Hours later, when the corridor fire finally thinned, Jalen and Rin carried Mara through the upper seam path. The dawn had passed. The sky darkened again under the metallic haze. It was the third night. The stars were sharp in the thin atmosphere, indifferent to the war below. Jalen looked up and tried to imagine Elise looking at the same sky from Earth. He could not see her face. He could not hear her laugh in his mind. He could only hold the idea that she existed, and that he had once been someone who could love her fully. That would have to be enough for now. On a distant relay station, far from Halo Ridge, an automated system flagged Mara's warning packet as high priority. A quiet committee did not dismiss it. They archived it, then forwarded it to a secure analysis division that answered to a different chain of power than Rourke's. Interest began, not as a roar, but as a single line moving upward on a graph. Night 3 settled over EIDOLON9. The sky was quiet, but the war was not. The station fell silent at last. No more alarms, no more corrections, just cooling metal, thinning radiation, and a sky that no longer bent around stolen minutes. Jalen stood beneath it, carrying what remained of his memories like fragments of a map burned at the edges. He could not return to the past, and he would never repair what had been taken from him, but he had stopped something worse from spreading. In a war obsessed with winning faster, he had chosen to remain human. Sometimes survival is not about changing history. Sometimes it is about protecting the small, fragile pieces of ourselves that make the future worth reaching at all. If this story stayed with you, if it made you pause, reflect, or feel the weight of choices made in silence, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who loves thoughtful science fiction, and subscribe to the channel for more hard science stories about war, humanity, and the cost of power. Thank you for listening.